is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is a group of people secretly working together for an evil purpose. This century, everything from assassinations to political coups and alien abductions, even the price of oil, have been linked to conspiracies. The question is, are conspiracies true? Are the facts being suppressed? Or is it all just paranoia on our part? Amongst all the innuendo about media suppression and government cover-ups, it's obvious to some that hidden forces constantly manipulate our lives. Whether we realize it or not, conspiracies affect us all, and they continue to flourish because they remain unsolved. To investigate the truth, we need to look through the maze of unanswered questions and uncover the secrets of what we call conspiracies. One of the most notorious conspiracies of this century claims that the Earth has been contacted by alien beings and that the governments of the world have kept the truth hidden from us. Over the last 40 years, an impressive volume of information has accumulated as evidence that the US government has alien spacecraft stored in vast bunkers beneath the Nevada desert. Las Vegas, a neon city in the dead heart of the Nevada desert, a city whose lights have long sheltered visitors from the harsh and hidden realities of its barren locality. Secreted in the hills and sand dunes 140 miles north of Las Vegas is a military zone known amongst investigators as Area 51.
Here that the government won't talk about. A large Air Force base on the shore of Groom Dry Lake, very large hangars, large satellite dishes, probably the longest runway in the world. Security here is certainly intense. On the inner perimeter you have who knows what sort of sensors. On the outer perimeter you have what we call the camo dudes. They wear camouflage fatigues with no insignia. They drive white Jeep Cherokees with no government markings. Very sinister force. It's a paramilitary force essentially patrolling both their military area and the public lands adjoining.
John Lear, son of Learjet inventor William Lear, is one of the world's most decorated aviators. His revelations were instrumental in exposing the covert activities at Area 51.
I think they used it as an underground area to hide recovered discs as early as 1948 or 49. They're here, they have an agenda, and there's not the slightest thing we can do about it.
Area 51 is no doubt part of the larger CIA/military infrastructure which permeates the entire globe.
At least 35 separate different craft. We were being visited by at least 10 different species of aliens.
Hangar 18 is the granddaddy of UFO conspiracy stories.
John Lear is an interesting man with an interesting background, associations with various intelligence agencies, and I owe him a debt of gratitude because he did help me when I initially began my UFO research.
He was at the scene of a UFO crash. What's his name? John Lear came to the station with a pile of UFO documents and was trying to interest our managing editor in doing a story about UFOs.
The government established an intensive program of ridicule against anyone who said they saw flying saucers.
Airline Captain John Lear suspects the government has known...
Fear of ridicule was the foundation on which the cover-up was placed.
Lear hinted that he knew someone who had intimate knowledge of the saucer program, and so I kept bugging him to allow us to meet this person, which turned out to be Bob Lazar.
In 1989, Bob Lazar, a nuclear physicist, came forward with a fantastic story. He claimed he had worked on recovered alien craft at a top-secret government facility.
It's kind of a long story how I became employed at that facility south of Area 51. It's called S4. I was originally employed at Los Alamos National Labs in New Mexico. While at Los Alamos Labs, I ran into Dr. Edward Teller. Edward Teller was essentially the father of the hydrogen bomb. It was he who came up with the original concept of the fusion device. I sent a resume out to him. He put in a good word for me, and I was granted an interview.
He came over here after one or two of them. He would say, John, they said that you're just interested in being my friend to get information on the F-117. I said, no, that's true, and that's not true. I'm just interested in UFOs.
Well, we had to sign an agreement essentially relieving us of our constitutional rights. Usually if you're employed by someone, it's very clear as to who's in charge. But the way things were set up here, I don't know. I know on my pay stub, it was from the Department of Naval Intelligence.
In December of 1988, Bob came in the evening, sat down in that chair. I was writing out bills, and he says, John, I saw a disc today. And I said, what? And he said, I saw a disc today. And I said, theirs or ours? And he said, theirs. And I said, you saw a flying site. Did you go up to the test site? And he said, yeah, I just got back. I said, then what are you doing here? And I said, they obviously followed you. Why don't you find out what's going on and then tell us?
Close range, what I witnessed, craft approximately 52 feet in diameter, 15 feet high. It's quite an unbelievable sight to see something that size lift completely silently. Later on, I was allowed inside the craft to see how the reactor was placed and how the gravity amplifiers were configured inside there. That was an ominous feeling entering. The seats inside the craft were much smaller than a human could use. It was obvious that this was not meant for people to fly in. There was only one vehicle that I worked on, though there were 9 total in different states of repair or disrepair. We really don't know how the fuel was manufactured. We just know that it was in the craft, and we were actively trying to find out what reaction it was undergoing to produce the energy to drive the craft.
I remember a particular evening in January. Bob came in, his eyes were bright. He said, John, you will never know what it's like to see your first alien. I said, you're kidding. It couldn't have been a midget. No. Couldn't have been a doll. No. That was it. He was absolutely positive.
What I did see was what I believe to be autopsy photos. It was a creature, and its chest was cut open in a T fashion, the skin peeled back. There were also photos of one single large organ that was removed. That was also cut up and being weighed. Whether or not they're absolutely authentic, I can't say. I can only assume because I was working on a craft that I know to be of alien in nature, that the other material that came along with it was probably authentic also. I had the test flight schedule for what was going on down at S4.
I said, well, how can we see it? He said, I know we can, a place where we can drive in. And we no sooner got out of the motorhome when this thing came up behind the mountain. From that distance, it was just a light. But when I got the Celestron 8 focused in on it, it was a flying saucer. And just a few minutes ago, we saw one of the government extraterrestrial UFOs fly over there. We all watched it for about 7 or 8 minutes. We're going to stay here for another couple hours here to see if we can show you folks an actual extraterrestrial flying saucer being flown by the government.
They performed maneuvers that were not aerodynamically possible with any other craft, and the fact that it glowed, which happened to be a byproduct of how the craft operated.
We're looking at a craft that was traveling huge distances, both to the left and the right, instantaneously.
Because we got away with it that night, it kind of became a habit, more or less, to keep going out there. And on one night, we got caught.
We had Geiger counters, film, video cameras, still cameras, everything. I started setting up the telescope, and about that time, the Broncos come up and said, what are you guys doing here?
The following day, I was taken in for debriefing and threatened, and really that's when the falling out more or less started with me and the people at S4. The day just ended, the notes were taken and other people were brought in, and I left wondering exactly what was going to happen.
20 miles from Area 51 along Highway 375 in the small town of Rachel, locals have noted mysterious and disturbing events for years.
People gathered here to discuss the sightings that they'd had. In most places, you can't talk about that kind of thing. You can't find a place to go.
That big around, and kind of the color maybe of a flashlight, but a long streak as it came through.
I saw a yellowish-white bright light rise up from the hill back over in this direction, skyward, hang motionless for 2 or 3 minutes, then slowly start to descend.
Between 89 and let's say 94, every time I came out, I saw something.
It would do a circle and it would go straight up, then it would drop, and it would go left or right.
Well, I'll tell you, I covered organized crime here in this city for a number of years.
have dealt with a lot of mob witnesses who told me that they were afraid of being bumped off by the mob. People are more afraid of our government than they are of organized crime. They're worried they're going to get killed.
I was constantly followed. My friends were harassed, shot at.
When he got his tire shot out on the freeway, this was the first place he came. And he said, I'm going to turn myself in. I said, relax, just, stay here for a while.
The news director and I went up to John Lear's home and met Lazar. We interviewed him for a period of several hours and were convinced this is a really interesting story.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of On the Record. Groom Lake, Nevada is one of the most secretive spots on the planet. It's located on the northeast edge of the Nevada test site and is said to be where numerous top-secret weapons systems have been tested over the years. According to some UFO researchers, it's also where the government is test flying alien spacecraft.
Well, there's 9 flying saucers of extraterrestrial origin that are out there. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all.
What about aliens? Any of those up there at Groom Lake?
I really want to steer away from that right now.
The first interview I did on TV was in silhouette. Everyone knew what I looked like at S4, but I didn't want to push back too much. I just wanted to say, hey, leave me alone, and it was hands off after that. No one had followed me. It had the desired effect. Everything stopped immediately. Most of my documents, as far as my past history, vanished, and that was not a natural occurrence.
Further harassment by the authorities brought Bob Lazar to court facing minor charges of pandering. The judge found it almost impossible to determine his identity.
That shows that he worked for the United States Department of Naval Intelligence. I also note that he is in fact listed in the Los Alamos National Laboratory telephone directory. It's obvious that it's very difficult to get information on Mr. Lazar from government sources enormously.
Well, we can't verify his education background. The claims for a master's degree from MIT and Caltech simply cannot prove it. He can't come up with any diplomas, can't come up with any professors, can't come up with any classmates who would verify his story.
Trying to make me a non-person, something where I couldn't prove my background, so anything I said really wouldn't be listened to.
However, I have been able to verify a lot of things about his background that make sense. We know he worked at Los Alamos Lab. He knew about the existence of a place called S4. Well, I confirmed with the government there really is a place called S4. I had never heard about it before. They say it exists. They just won't tell me where it is.
When the Lazar story broke in '89, the UFO watchers swarmed around this area, and they discovered 2 hills. One of them is called White Sides Mountain. It's the mountain with the white sides in the distance. And the other one discovered more recently was Freedom Ridge. Both these hills offered a clear view across the valley of the space that doesn't exist, which created a lot of embarrassment.
Within the past year, the government seized an additional 4,000 acres of land around Groom Lake, the land on which people would peer down on the base. I have interviewed now more than 24 people who have worked at that facility, who all tell me bits and pieces of the same story. That story being, we've seen these disc-shaped craft. Some of them have just seen these things sitting in a hangar. Some of them have seen them in flight. But clearly that many people telling you that they've seen something over and over again over all that time period suggests that something really is going on out there. And there are a number of photographs that have been taken out there of odd objects in the sky, disc-shaped objects. There are videos that were taken out there by people who are out in the desert looking to see what they can see.
We're about 2 miles from the military border now on public land. I used to map these sensors, record their locations using the radio, and then if you want to sneak around, all you have to do is simply pull the power plug, and you're free to pass by. And then after you've passed by, you put the power plug back on. These cables here are connected to magnetic cylinders buried beside the road on either side, and I'll show you them. Follow this cable under here. There you have the sensor unit. This detects any big piece of metal going by. There are live guards on the top of various of these hills that are always there 24 hours a day. Their only job is to watch the desert.
The saucers are in fact gone from Area 51 because too many people are out there in the desert looking for it.
No, I'm quite sure that testing stopped years ago. I doubt very much that the base is even any longer there. The remnants of it might be.
One of the earliest locations to be suggested as a possible storage place is the facility at Pine Gap in Australia, because of the top-secret facilities that are already there.
Where would I put him? I'd put him in the South Pacific.
Cover-up probably started for pretty good reasons back in the late 1940s when the modern UFO era began. It's likely that our country really didn't know what was going on. We didn't know where these things were from, what they were here for, what they wanted from us. And there probably really was a danger that there might be an outbreak of panic if the public were told that these things are from somewhere else. But so many lies have been told over the years since then that I think that once the cover-up is exposed, if in fact that ever happens, that some of these military people would go to jail.
The government is in a holding status quo. They're just waiting for whatever the aliens are going to do.
We know that Lear was intimately connected with the CIA. People connected with the CIA tend to stay connected with the CIA.
From the government people that I know, they say the next 5 years is going to be very interesting.
The government wants people to be confused about Area 51. The government wants to think these dancing lights are UFOs as opposed to advanced weapons systems. They don't want us to have an in-depth knowledge about their strike force capabilities.
The CIA has been a factor in the downfall of many foreign governments. Most people, however, are shocked to discover how big a player the CIA has been in the politics of Allied nations. In late 1975, a security crisis existed in Australia. The Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, hinted he would no longer allow the CIA to operate the top-secret communications base known as Pine Gap. By 1 p.m. on November the 11th, 1975, the government was out of power, and, some would argue, the CIA was back in control.
Well, may we say, God save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
It's taken 18 months to assemble Pine Gap from prefabricated buildings. Now, no aeroplane can fly closer than 2.5 miles to the base. The secrecy is total.
Since we agreed in December 1966 the Americans could build it, Pine Gap near Alice Springs has been the center of speculation on the CIA's activities here. Officially, it's an experimental space station.
Pine Gap was to be a joint facility run by the Defense Departments of Australia and the United States. Stallings and another senior CIA man, Victor Marchetti, drafted the Pine Gap Treaty laying out the ground rules for cooperation between the two governments.
Officially, this executive agreement between the Australian and US governments stated that all surveillance information gathered at Pine Gap would be shared equally.
There's no doubt whatsoever about it. Pine Gap was set up by the CIA for espionage, and that remains what it's about.
Liberal Party leader Robert Menzies led the longest-serving government in Australia's history.
The world needs the United States of America. The world needs the United States of America. The world needs the United States of America.
Strong links between Australia and the US have been formed, allowing for a proliferation of top-secret bases. All that was about to change.
The first Labor Prime Minister of Australia for 23 years, Gough Whitlam.
Would you trust your international affairs again to the men who gave you Vietnam? It's a choice between the past and the future. It's time for a new government.
When the Whitlam government was elected in 1972, there was considerable concern in Washington.
Both raised the question of the American military installations in Australia with particular reference to the secrecy surrounding them. Could you indicate the policy your government will take on these questions?
There now need be no secrecy because Mr. Barnard and I can find out whatever we want to.
Christopher John Boyce is serving 42 years in a state penitentiary for counter-espionage. At the age of 24, he was caught selling secrets gathered at Pine Gap to the Russians while working as a cipher clerk at TRW Communications, an alleged front for the CIA.
They were going to cut the Australians out of the existing information that was coming down. But in any case, it was a screw the Aussies type project.
It didn't take very long for the Whitlam government to get itself offside with the Nixon administration.
I have concluded that the time has come for action.
I objected to the American bombing of Hanoi, undefended open bombing of Hanoi. I complained about that. The American ambassador at the time was sent to tell Whitlam that they objected very strongly to that.
And we saw this Whitlam government come into power, moving in, barging in. We were deeply concerned.
They were frightened of the small degree of independence being displayed by the Labor government.
The Labor government was regarded as a security risk by the United States, and the United States at an official level would have done everything they could to have it removed.
You don't see the jewels of counterintelligence being placed in jeopardy by a party that was seeking a new way for Australia.
Early in 1973, Whitlam demanded from ASIS, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service, the names of operatives and where they were actually carrying out their operations. And he was told that there were operatives in Chile working under the CIA involved in the destabilisation of the Allende government. And he immediately informed them to cease that particular operation. They didn't, and at least 2 of our operatives were there in September 73 when that bloody coup took place that toppled Salvador Allende. Enter Marshall Green, the new American ambassador to Canberra, a senior career diplomat heavily involved in at least 3 coups, most notably the one in Indonesia. Marshall Green actually stated that if the Australian government dared to in any way take the power away from US multinationals, and he used the phrase, we would move in.
The world needs the United States of America.
John Kerr was selected as Governor General by Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, despite warnings from his colleagues about Kerr's allegiance to certain US intelligence organizations.
John Kerr was president of Law Asia, which is a CIA-funded organisation in the Pacific.
When I first saw him way back in 1944 or 45, he was part of an intelligence organisation in the Army then.
The lease for the renewal of Pine Gap was due on the 9th of December, and large sections of the Labor Party wanted to close it down because they were not happy with having a foreign base of that type in this country.
Mr Whitlam made a number of comments in Parliament telling the Australian public what the Pine Gap base was about, and made various comments about Richard Stallings, who set up the Pine Gap base, and part of the US intelligence community actually lived in Doug Anthony's house in Canberra.
But I've had no associations with CIA money in Australia, as Anthony has.
In October, Whitlam sacked the head of ASIS, and this was followed by the sacking of Barber, who was the head of ASIO.
It's a tender plant that needs nourishment. Some of the major secrets that deal with the world I was once in were given to the Australian services.
Well, Shackley has got a long history of involvement overthrowing other countries' governments or attempting to do so. And Shackley was an organiser of the Bay of Pigs invasion for Cuba. Shackley was involved in Vietnam. Shackley was clearly an interested party in what was happening in Australia.
goal, I think, was to get rid of Woodlands. That was the whole purpose, I think, was to bring in somebody that they were much closer with and could feel would be more reliable and see things more their way.
We got more than a fair go. The one Mr. Whitlam to get the hell out of Canberra.
The 11th of November is a very interesting day. It's certainly much more than John Kurgona Remembrance Day coming back and dismissing government. Whitlam was to address Parliament and he was going to blow the lid on the CIA operatives in Australia. He was meant to give that speech in the afternoon of the 11th of November 1975. Unfortunately, 1 p.m. came along before he could do the speech and he was dismissed.
The Parliament you elected in May last year has been dissolved. The proclamation which you have just heard read by the Governor-General's official secretary was countersigned Malcolm Fraser.
Malcolm had just come back from Government House. He just said, Doug, I want you to come in and see me straight away. He said, the Governor-General has dismissed the government. I said, I'll be right in.
In the most tumultuous day in Australian political history, the Prime Minister has been sacked, the opposition leader has been asked to form a caretaker government, and both houses of Parliament have been dissolved.
1975 was a watershed period in Australian history. I think to a great extent we were pretty naive. You know, we knew about interference in other countries, but we hadn't experienced quite the same degree of it firsthand, and I think we're unprepared for it.
It's a chilly, but in a much more muted and sophisticated and subtle form.
The parallels between the Kennedy assassination and the Whitlam dismissal are staggering, really. They're both populist leaders, well respected and liked by the people of the country. Both threatened the CIA in one way or another. Kennedy threatened to scatter it to the winds after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. Whitlam threatened to close the bases. Whitlam withdrew troops. Kennedy threatened to withdraw troops. That military mindset joins Chiefs of Staff and the CIA, and in doing so, they had to hit back. So Kennedy was shot in Dallas. You don't need an assassination down here in Australia. You just need to have the Governor-General in your pocket, and same outcome. The end of the government.
Did the CIA orchestrate the downfall of an Allied government? What is certain is that the CIA is still present in Australia and still very active. By the car and the combustion engine. Despite 100 years of progress, we are still driving vehicles which are essentially the same as when they first appeared. The reason, according to some, is due to a secret pact between big business and big government to stop new ideas being developed. Despite threats to their lives, inventors and renegade scientists persist in their search for that ultimate free energy machine that will revolutionize technology.
I had the Aristotle Onassis Foundation come to me and say, we could send a bomb in here and blow you to bits. The people are threatening you, cutting off your support, putting your multimillionaire backer in a mental institution, turning off your radio station, intimidating your companies into bankruptcy, then it's time to go.
Well, free energy threatens the people in power because they are in power because of monopolies on what's termed fossil fuels, coal, gas. So the basic power structure of society is threatened.
Anybody that has two eyes in their head can see the environmental effects of burning things and what they're doing to the world. And collectively over this planet, I mean, we're eating ourselves to death, and so we need some energy from someplace which doesn't depend on burning things up. Right now we have the entrenched energy monopolies and cartels. You know, we have OPEC and we have the 7 sister oil companies that control all the oil and energy. But what people have to understand is that the people who run the energy business in this world, which is the biggest business on the planet, turning over $4 to $5 trillion a year, it's bigger than guns and drugs, it's bigger than defense. They control the newspapers, they control the governments. But these companies are so big that they regulate the government which regulates them.
It's not free. Nothing is free. But cheap and efficient energy exchange is a viable concept.
Now I say that everything in this universe is free energy. It's been dreamed of for hundreds of years that somewhere, someplace, as Tesla said, man will hook his machinery to the very wheelwork which drives the universe itself.
The history of science is the history of the suppression of great inventions. A few classic stories. Nikola Tesla.
Nikola Tesla is regarded as the founding father of free energy. His astounding developments in the generation of alternating electrical current are still being used today. His most notorious project involved the transmission of wireless electricity into the atmosphere, which allowed for unlimited power to be freely accessed by everyone. When his financial backer, J.P. Morgan, realized that this power system could not be metered, all funding was immediately withdrawn. Tesla's electrical broadcast towers were dismantled, and through Morgan's many close connections with the media and government, Tesla's career was destroyed. In 1977, Bruce De Palma unveiled the first prototype of the N machine, an electrical generator which uses rotating magnets to generate up to 5 times more power than it takes to drive it.
I know about the fact that the Japanese government and the Indian government have ongoing projects to produce N machines for domestic power. My partner is Paramahamsa Tiwari, who is the director of the Nuclear Power Corporation of India, which operates all the nuclear plants in India.
In late 70s, I learned from Bruce De Palma that he had carried out certain crucial experiments by rotating electromagnets.
Tiwari tested a prototype based on De Palma's N machine under laboratory conditions. The results were deemed too impressive, causing disbelief and suspicion among conservative government officials and the power consortiums that backed the project. Tiwari was forced to abandon the project completely.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy, and as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
U.S. inventor Stan Myers released his water-powered car engine in 1988.
The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Myers' invention. There's talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run Army tanks.
Myers found it virtually impossible to secure financial backing after certain Pentagon officials paid him a visit. A number of similar inventions were developed and tested all around the world.
My best friend was killed over this matter. There's a chap here, about 10 minutes away from here, driving. He has been running his car on water since 1986 with the government's permission, provided that he keeps his mouth shut. And with regular intervals, using his own words, they keep warning him to keep his mouth shut. One of our colleagues who have been running car on the water for the 10-year period now, he reckons that it's 26 times more powerful than petrol.
If you invent a better mousetrap, the world may beat a path to your door. If you invent a free energy machine, there'll be a path beat to your door, but you don't want those people there.
One of the pivotal people that I encountered early in my career was Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut.
Edgar J. Mitchell, an Apollo mission astronaut, founded the Noetics Institute in Southern California. The Institute's charter was supposedly to develop alternative energy systems by attracting inventors from all over the country. Mitchell became extremely interested in De Palma's N machine. He made De Palma a paltry offer to buy out the invention, which De Palma naturally refused.
He said to me that if I ever tried anything on my own in California, I would get my head blown off. So I was scared to death. The CIA operates through various very innocent-looking fronts to find out what people are thinking and what they're inventing. Now, what's more innocent than a benign institute founded on transcendental principles to help New Age inventors bring free energy into the world?
And that situation still exists in the United States today, where a person that really understands what's going on just can't get their idea out because the alternative science and medical fields have been co-opted by the intelligence services.
And he converted this little engine to run on water. This is many, many years ago. And he used it for several years. And somehow the news got out, and one day he got visitors, and he was told to dump the engine or else. 3 weeks later, the man was dead. And the coroner's finding was that he fell off the back of a train. He was drunk. Now, it happened that he didn't drink.
Even Dr. Townsend T. Brown, the electrogravitic research scientist, has on his 16-millimeter film of his lab test, which we've got here, he has guys with the black suits and black hats come into the place. You can see where the legends come from. I mean, these guys come in and they look like, you know, bad Bart to black man. I mean, it's classic, and these things do happen.
There is no progressive science in a world where every scientific idea is evaluated for its military potential.
Power, or energy, control of energy equals power in the new world order that is emerging. If you control the energy, the way we get around, the way we get electricity, the way we have our TVs and video cameras and stuff, if you do the control of the energy, then you've got control of the people.
Each conspiracy leads to another, and eventually they all lead to one grand global conspiracy, orchestrated by an ominous network called the New World Order.
The New World Order is this long-term scheme that originates from the higher concentrations of money on this planet, the elitists, the aristocracy, the royalty, bringing all control together in a single governing body so that the economy, politics, and the social order are more easily manipulated.
This establishment we may consider as the New World Order is moving towards a one world government. Now, how is that occurring? In some countries we may see a coup, in other countries we may see political parties breaking down. These things may just seem like the course of history, but really being structured and orchestrated by the strings of the New World Order.
It's a control thing. The New World Order is about controlling the population of the world.
Information is a weapon they can use against you.
The New World Order is very closely linked in with the international banking cartels, and those groups now are manipulating national governments through debt. It's very clear that there's a dozen or 13 family dynasties that collectively control the USA and the banking cartels that form the core banking entities in the world today.
These banking families have been doing this for decades. They make the wars. They make and break nations.
Can't fool all of the people all of the time.
The Rockefeller interests are one of the prime groups that control some of the biggest banking organisations in the world, and through that, certainly they are major players in controlling the US Federal Reserve, and the government of the United States toes the line to the Federal Reserve because it is privately owned and it pulls the purse strings.
New World Order. I saw the Gulf War as an exercise in terror. It was a staging of a war which would shock the world.
New World Order.
When the New World Order was declared by President Bush, it was during a war. War was being used to tell people, okay, we are now in control.
The enforcement agency for the New World Order is very clearly and inarguably the United Nations.
What George Bush was saying to the world with the Gulf War was that we, United States, control United Nations.
Just the way it's going to be.
George Bush is an exceptional case because he was the head of the CIA, and he is fundamentally a Texas oil millionaire. He represents the oil interest.
They want to know all about you as an individual. Well, don't take that pencil.
There is absolutely a connection between the intelligence agencies of most nations and the New World Order. The orders that they get given in many cases are absolutely despicable, and some of the worst of it is in the area of chemical and biological warfare experimentation, mind control, assassination, manipulation of foreign governments, things where America has become what Ronald Reagan referred to as the evil empire. Anybody who has an interest in civil liberties should be in grave fear of the New World Order, because what George Orwell wrote in his book 1984 was just foreshadowing what he recognised would happen if we just let this scam run unchecked.
This one world government, from what I've seen, from what I know, is a small group of people, globally, strung together, harnessed together, to make us accept the fact that this is the ultimate way for the globe to be controlled.
Relating events as a strategy to control the globe? Nobody knows. That's the nature of conspiracies. There's no end to them. As each piece of information is gathered, we simply discover a bigger puzzle. What is evident is that there are no simple answers. Maybe there is something common to all conspiracies that can be discovered by further exploration. All we need to do then is ask the right questions.